So using lists allows you to segment people who you want to check up on, but you just don't have the bandwidth to follow, or maybe you don't really want to follow all the time, but you want to check in on them every so often. So a really good example are lists that I follow over here. So here's kind of your list center is in this right sidebar, and that's going to show lists that you follow. Here's where things get weird. You know how you can follow an individual person? You can follow someone else's list as well. And when you follow that list, it doesn't mean that the list shows up in your tweet stream. It doesn't mean that you're following the people who are on the list. All it means is that it shows up in this right sidebar right here. So I want to show you the Summit Series example that I'm following, because this is a way that you might want to use lists. So this is a list that I'm following. Again, following it does not mean that I've added all these people, but I can add some of them. You know, for example, I follow Marie Forleo. I don't follow Chris Wise, but they're both showing up in this list that someone else created. Again, for me, following just means that it's in this right sidebar. Sorry. And this list happens to be of all the people that went to this conference called Summit Series. So perfect example of when you would want to use a list. So I went to this conference called Summit Series. I met some really amazing people. They're people that I want to keep up with, but it's 90 new people. And some of them do things that honestly I have no interest in, that I don't want to hear from all the time. But it is nice for me to have a way to kind of pop in and say hi and check in on them. So this list is the perfect way to do that. I don't have to follow all those people, but maybe once a month or before the next Summit Series comes up or whatever it is, I can just kind of take a minute to look through here, see what people are up to, maybe look for some things to respond to. Again, a way to keep up without having to actually follow. So now let's talk about how to follow other people's lists and how to create a list. So first, let's create a new list. Again, all the list stuff happens in your sidebar right here when you're signed on to Twitter. I'm going to click New List and make a list name. So I'll just call this Test List. The description you want to use so other people can understand what your list is about if anybody else wants to follow it. So for this one, I'm just going to write testing 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to make this public. Okay, the difference between public and private. Public is public in every way. So that means when somebody clicks on my profile, they can see that I've created this list. Who's on the list is totally public. Other people can choose to follow it. It'll show up in Google, all that good stuff. Private is totally private. That means nobody knows who's on the list. Nobody knows that the list exists at all. People can't tell if they're on the list. No one can subscribe to it. You can only see it when you're signed on to your own account. So you might want to use a private list for things like maybe you want to keep track of prospective clients, or maybe you want to keep track of the competition. That's a great thing you would use a private list for, because you're not going to start something called competition, right? And put it on a private list. Or maybe it's just like people that you kind of want to follow but not enough to actually follow, so it's kind of a second tier thing and you don't want to have a public list called second tier. So when you have it private, no one can see the name, no one can see the description, but I would still recommend that you be a little bit secretive in what you call the list, because even though it's private, you know, this is the internet, you never know what people are going to come across. Oh, okay, this even makes my point even further. Sarah just told me that if people are on your private list, they can see the title of that list. Okay, so that's really interesting. So I need to correct myself, because one little thing I just told you was not right. With a private list, people, if LKR is on your private list, I can see that I'm on your list and what it's called, but I can't subscribe to it. I can't see anyone else who's on it, which makes it extra important that you do what I was about to say and make kind of a sneaky name for your list. So let's say that you want to start a list of competitors. you know, you're a realtor. Like we had a question earlier. She said, I'm a realtor in LA, and she was asking about her competitors. And so you want to start a list of all the other realtors, but you don't want to call it my competitors. And you could start a public list called like LA home industry or something like that. That would be another way to tackle it. But let's say you just want a private list. So instead of calling it my competitors, you're going to call it like MCLA. And that stands for my competitors LA, or just MC, or just MC Twitter, or something like that. So this name is unique to your account. I think there can be other lists of the same name. I think. Yeah, there can be other lists of the same name because they're under other people's accounts. So be a little bit sneaky with your name. Don't call it like jerk faces or people that were rude to me once. Okay, I'm just kind of having fun here now. But instead of people that were rude to me once, you're like rude once to me. And then you can call your list R1TM. You know, just let's be cool with our private list names. So anyway, now we're going to do a public list called Testing123, and let's keep this rude once to me name because it's such a great name, R1TM, and I will create that list. Okay, now I have to find people to add to my list. But usually when you're creating a list, you're not so much finding people to add, but you're coming across people that you want to add on a list. And so let's go through my followers, because maybe this is something that you'll want to do with your followers. Maybe you want to kind of semi-follow them for a while to find out if you really want to follow them. You could add them to, again, some sort of tier 2 list that you don't want to call tier 2, maybe just T2 or something. But so here's somebody that I added to this list that we have of everybody that's in this course, your Backstage Pass to Twitter. And so let's say that Laura Casey was also in the course. I'm going to click on her profile, and then I'm going to click lists. So for now, I can add her to this R1TM. Laura Casey has not actually been rude to me, for the record, but now she's on that list. I can add her to the other list as well. I'll take that one off so not to confuse people. And see, look, it's like she's listened to my advice, even though she's not in this webinar. Well, as far as I know, I guess she could be on this webinar. Ooh, she's editor-in-chief of Southern Wedding Magazines. That's kind of cool. So she has these lists called MTH Chicago. She's using like a little bit of secret code maybe, or maybe not, because it says MTH 2010 here. But that could be that could be secret code. So to add people to your list, like when you come across people that you want to be on a list, you're just going to click on their name and then click this little list button right here. You can also see that when I clicked followers, I got that same button right here. So that's how I add people to my lists. You can see I have this private list called Peeps. That's a good neutral name there. And then if I want to delete a list, you go to right here at the top corner, delete. Okay, now let's talk about how you can follow other people's lists, because that can be a good way to keep track of what's going on in your industry. So I'm following this list from IttyBiz called Publicly Delicious. Let's just look at how we can see all of her lists. So if I click on this little button next to IttyBiz's name, I can go to her profile. No, or I can go to this list, but then I can click here and go to her profile. And I can see these lists that she's created on the right side. So I'm going to hit View All, and she has Publicly Delicious, Hot Dudes with Goatees, and Tweet Upable. So you see, some people are using this just for fun. There's a million different ways that you can use this. She has Hot Dudes with Goatees that only has one person on it, right? But maybe I want to see her Tweet Upable list, because I would guess these are people in the same city that she's in. And so maybe I'm in that city too, and I'm like, ooh, I want to keep track of these people. So I could just click right here, and now I'm following this list. And again, what following means is just that it shows up in my little sidebar right here.